Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you very much for stopping by once again. Now, I've been sort of in seclusion here for the last 2-3 weeks. What happened was it rarely ever happens, but it happened and unexpectedly. And I was contacted by somebody who wanted me to do a piece of research or some support for him as he looked at possibilities down here in Panama. Now, I want to clarify this is that I don't do this very often at all, and I don't seek it. I go asking people. So what my attitude toward it is very simple. It has to be at least 3 to 5 years, a concept in their minds, and it can be beyond that, but nothing like in 1 year, out the next. I mean, it doesn't normally work that way here. But it would mean, and it's not buying a house or something of this sort, but it's doing something that's a project of some kind. And I like to think it's a good one and it's going to be useful in the country and so forth. But the primary concern is that it be substantial and be significant. It's going to probably cost quite a bit of money, and that means the person coming and looking for it has got to be someone who can bring the money forward to do the work, because otherwise they're not going anywhere with it. And I don't want to spend my time trying to put something together that cannot receive support. So I sit down, when somebody contacts me, and if they're here, if they do it by mail, I say, well, when you're here in town, let's talk. But the critical thing is that we get to know each other and decide whether I have confidence in him or her that they have their act together. They know what they want to do. And I have a clear idea of it, and they have to feel confident that they trust me and that we're going to be able to communicate well together. It's as simple as that. So when that happens, then I go to work, and in this case, it was pretty intense because the deadline was pretty quick, and I found near the end that I was going out of my mind because there was something wrong with the many spreadsheets I had out in front of me and all the various work I was doing with them, and I had to find whether it was one number or one cell entry or one formula or whatever. There was a mistake somewhere. I knew it. So I had to find that, and it was just mind-boggling, but I found it. So it took care of it. All is well, and I'm very thankful for that. Now, with all this done, I collected a bit of information, and I'm going to share that with you. Before I start, I'll just say that it comes from the work I did here, and this is public record, and I would have come up with it anyhow because it's something I follow on a regular basis. But I had just prepared it for him as part of his report, and as far as I was concerned, he owned it in a sense. And I just said, simple, I just said, I'd like to use this particular piece of information, this sort of stuff, in a report to people. In general, do you have any objections to this? Because if you do, and you feel that I'm violating your privacy, so to speak, then say so. And no problem. Do it. So, of course, it has no bearing at all, and you never know anything about him or what he's trying to do. On the basis of this, I could have assumed that. I don't think I've had any problem at all, but I don't assume, I ask. And that's a question that boils down to one word: ethics. And maybe it's a little extreme, but in this day and age and this world, if you stick to ethics, at least people know where you're coming from, and it's so important, and you always hope you get it in return. Anyhow, so moving on, here's some information I got. It was really standard stuff and that I would have gotten. Anyhow, but you see in front of you, Q1, that's January, February, March of 2019, 2022, and 2023. Right off the bat, I'm going to explain to you what it's about. It says approved, but really awarded to. It might have been an even better way of putting it. But these visas are residency visas, both permanent and temporary, and they are finished, settled, done. The person has been here, filled out everything that can be done. Migracion, our immigration office, said fine. And their photos been taken, and the permanent residents have their cedula, and the temporary residents have their carnet. Okay, fine. So at that point, they're included. So that's not the people who necessarily applied in January, February, March, but who came to the conclusion at that stage. In a normal period under I would expect most of them to be people from November, December, and even earlier sometimes, and some perhaps from January, because the truth of the matter is there's a wide range of experience here people have and how long it takes for everything to get done. You keep in mind, some people come from countries that getting your police report can be a mind-boggling exercise and not happen overnight. Others may face, some countries, a situation where they have to bribe to get it. You know, I'm not saying they tell me this, and I don't know that for a fact, but I know it happens. There's all sorts of challenges that go on, and one couple there had to prove their marriage. Regulations being different for different countries, and so they had to give their marriage certificate. Well, that had burned up like decades ago. These people are in their 70s, 60s, 70s, and they weren't able to get a copy of it. And we just, well, let's say it was a challenge. They got through it. I finally got the embassy here to say, yep, these people are married. And it was satisfactory. But you get all this stuff that goes on. So that's ought to be kept in mind. Now, as you can see in 2019, that by the way is just a normal. It's a low end of the range that this normally for quarters like this. It's not a especially high number. 2019 was not that great a year, really, in many respects. But it happened to be the last one prior to the pandemic. So there it sits, so you get an idea of what is involved. In 2022, those first 3 months were the rise in initial people coming in. It might have been, well, we'll see if it's going to be different when we see, as you can see, in the next year. But at that point, there had been an improvement. Obviously, we're getting back into normal. We were a bit above that. There are reasons for that in part, which I will discuss a little later. And then finally, you have 2023. This year, there's a rather substantial increase, and that is a very high one. Now, the quarters tend to be about more or less the same. It's not like we have, first and second quarters are low and the third and fourth are high or anything. No, they're more or less in the same range. So when you get over 7,000, you're up in high level. And we'll see how that remains, but it's an important thing to note. Now, in addition, I'm going to show you some other statistics because I want you to understand how important it is that context be taken into account. Analysis requires interpretation, not just statistics. Statistics can mislead you, not because there's anything wrong with the stat, but because you don't take into account the context. So let's take a look at this one, the same quarters, okay? And in this case, we're talking about whether the number of Americans, specifically, number of Americans receiving or being awarded their residency visas. Now, why this particular crowd? Because it happens to show it's only because the example is very clear, and it's one of the nationalities with larger numbers, and so it's not something where a small country with very few. And why is this big burst up in 2022? And it seems to have just died right out in 2023. It's all your misunderstanding. And why? It's context. In 2022, we had a number of people from the United States, as well as other countries, who came into Panama who would have been taken care of months earlier. But they couldn't get here. They either couldn't get out of their country, they couldn't get into ours, or they could get out of theirs, but they couldn't be assured of getting back in. Everything was going on. It was still that period of shift and change. It was not complete. We had been growing economically very well the year prior in 21, and 22 was going to be another very good year for us. But that's not the critical factor here. The critical factor is getting here so you could show up at the electoral tribunal and get your darn card. And a whole bunch of people came in that quarter to do precisely that. And that is part of a very, very good piece of the reason why there's that jump in percentage of that. So if you don't do that and you just look at these statistics, you think, my God, Americans Okay, very enthusiastic, but they came back. They lost their faith, and they don't like Panama anymore. People come up with the weirdest stuff. No, this is not bad. Now, there's something else to be said about this. I'm not going to break it all down by country, even though I just showed the Americans, because they showed a statistical example. They're more done for an idea in your mind as to how I go about looking at things. But the real question is, why were we over 7? And the answer is really very, very, very clear in South America and Central America, and specifically Nicaragua. And those folks, bless their hearts, are in a horrific situation up there, and they are coming down. They've been down before. We know them well, and have great sympathy for them facing what they're facing, and have been for some time. But the big story is South America, and that's where so many of them are coming in specifically. I'll mention one because it's very blatantly obvious, and that is a great increase in the number of Colombians coming from Colombia. Now, Colombians are right next door. And so they've been here in and out. They've had people working here for a long time. There are any number of Colombians who live here, already have their residency permits. Some have been here for many years, have played an important role in society, and are Panamanian citizens now. All this. So we're very used to them. But when you see a jump, as we're seeing here, over of that 7,000 some, that 2,100 more them were Colombians all by themselves, and then the other 60 countries that sent people make up the rest of it. Venezuela was left far behind at this stage, and so was the U.S. What's going on here? And the answer in the simplest form is that Colombia is going through a difficult political, economic, and social period in their history. This happens from time to time. I'm not being judgmental. I'm not for or against. I mean, that would be silly. But it's true, no question about it, because that's the people who decide this. Other people who are actually coming, and they're coming because of this concern. At least that's how they express it. And I'm not terribly surprised. We've known this for a little while, it's likely. Then, of course, there are others like Peruvians and so forth, Ecuadorians. We have people coming from all over, even Argentina, to get residency visas here, and Chile. But these nations, and I'm going to stop for just a moment and just say to you that if you really go in and you look at the data and the interpretation, the work that's done, the analysis, everything else, it's perfectly respectable publications and so on. And you will see that Latin America is considered to be in terrible shape. There's a lot of concern about Latin America, not us. And it's one of the weirdest things to do is to go in and read an International Monetary Fund or the Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean, both of which came out recently, and both have lowered their expectations for Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of an increase in their GDP for the coming year, but not Panama. In one instance, Panama was raised, everybody else was lowered, and we're usually number one, and yet we are. We're either number one or we're tied for it or something like that in these estimates. They've always underestimated it for us. Fine. It's better that we underestimated it at this stage. But the key point is not us. It's all these other nations. And the number who have negative growth coming up are underway now and considered to be. The number that are having violence of one sort or another, my Lord in heavens, Ecuador is having a terribly difficult time. And we've always had good relations with Ecuador. You hate to see these things happen because, well, anyhow, they happen. So all over Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Venezuela, and so forth, Ecuador, Colombia, they're having problems. And they're expected to have more of them this year. And it could even get worse the following year because they haven't got a handle yet on how they're going to get out of this mess. And that is important to you. And I'll tell you, I just want to take one moment to stop and say, congratulate the folks in Costa Rica. They had gone way down. They were deeply in junk bond territory. Their financial situation was the pits. And it's still is a long ways to go before they're back up to investment grade, but they have moved up. And for the first time in a long time, they've moved up a couple notches here, thankfully, because they were not that far above default or technical default, where they're defaulted even though it hasn't happened yet. No. They're moving up, and that's because they're bringing in some financial constraints. They're bringing their spending under control, and that's always been the issue. I am so proud of them. I mean, this is great. This is wonderful news. We're not in competition with Costa Rica. They're our neighbors, and for them to be in trouble is not going to help us at all. We're very different countries, as I tell you. Remember, we speak different versions of Spanish. It's the simplest way to put it. We're very different nations, but we're in a very bad shape. It's still got problems, and the job is not yet done. So it's not like it's over. They still have a ways to go, and anything can happen in this real world, and they're very dependent on tourism, but they've seen an increase in tourist arrival this year. I mean, I'm just very pleased to see that happen and to congratulate them on that, because it takes self-discipline and hard work to get there, and not many nations are able to pull that together when they need it. So good for you. Now, let's see what else I've got here. Oh, yeah, the impact on you. I would just be very blunt here. When people come here to get residency visas, whether they're temporary or they're permanent or whatever their visa may concern, they don't all have to buy a property or a home, but they do have to live somewhere. So they're going to rent, if not buy. One or the other. And they could do both, I suppose, if they wanted to. But yeah, it brings in buyers and renters, particularly into the metropolitan area, because that's where the money is, the jobs are, the connections are. This is where people, remember, these people coming in tend to be, the majority are in their 30s and 40s. They are, many of them in business. They have kids that need to go to school. They're not retirees of people over the age of 60, 65 are a minority group for sure, and those getting these visas. These visas are predominantly for people middle-aged and younger middle-aged than young adults, but young middle-aged, I call them, 30s and 40s. That's because I'm almost 78. Just a few more days and I'll have made it. But so they look younger every year. But this is a good crowd of folks to have come in. They need someplace to live, and some of them, as Colombians, for example, may have family here already. They can stay with it. It may make it different for them, but there's going to be upward pressure on prices. It does not necessarily have to come from the U.S., for example, which is where it has come from a couple of decades ago, or from Europe, although there's still real potential there for a big increase from Europe, and we do see some upward rise there. But South America alone can have a dramatic impact on things here. And they've done it in the past, and that's why in the great housing bust in the United States some years ago, in the global financial crisis, the prices of housing in the metropolitan area remained very stable and actually rose in some areas. Now, out in the countryside, different story, because people coming in here don't head out there. They're looking, for jobs and offices and so forth, and schools and the whole works. So they will have an impact, and it's just going to eventually raise prices. I don't know. I can't predict these things. I will tell you this: that so far we've been looking for in the Panama wave thing. We don't promote this, but it's there. It's a service. You want it. We do the best we can. We have people who they've asked us. We Costa del Este, which is very modern and sort of a Florida, Miami, or I guess, or Southern California vibe to it, or whatever you want to say. It's very modern, and it's a complete business center in itself. It's really quite something to see. It's very walkable too, but it's off to one side. It's between the downtown city, which most of you will have seen when you will ride in, and the airport, and it's ideally located for people from South America, but also from regional offices who need to get off to the airport to fly up to wherever for business purposes, and a variety of other reasons. It's very popular, but it's expensive, yeah, for sure. Another area is Balboa Avenue, Avenida Balboa. That is the street that sort of bends around the corner and overlooks the bay, with lots of skyscrapers and whatever. In fact, it's the cover photo for this particular, one of them is the cover photo for this particular video. That those areas are tough. Oh, and then Casco Viejo, that's definitely the old quarter. We're talking about areas that are very expensive and, generally speaking, have been outside the reach of many people who have come down or just haven't been willing to spend that much money to rent or buy in that particular areas. I was concerned when we started getting, particularly Balboa, a lot of Balboa pressure, but they're there. Maurice Bellanger, who does the actual searching, and he is extremely good. And it's not just because he looks on the internet. He picks up the phone. He starts calling people, friends, and he's been in the business for a very long time. And he has done wonderful, wonderful work in finding places. We have not yet, knock on wood, failed to find options for people who come in that have failed to meet their needs. And so that would have been, I would have not even tried. To tell you the truth, it would have been very, very difficult for someone like myself to do. Plus, I'm also illegal. I'm not an agent. But that's why I have Maurice as a partner. And it's very, very useful. And we are very pleased. And they're getting anywhere, depending on when you look back to whatever price these places were sometime earlier. These are rentals. In this case, Costa del Este was a purchase and so on. But along Avenida Balboa and Casco Viejo, these areas, we're talking anywhere from $500 to $800 a month less than would have been the cost. I think is a pretty fair estimate. Yeah, say 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And I wasn't anticipating it was going to be quite like that. But you have to know, and you have to know what everything's going on, and you've got to know how to negotiate, and that's one thing where having a good agent on your side. See, most agents who deal with you here, they have this whole bunch of real estate that their agency needs to unload, and they sell. And they're really looking on behalf of their agency. They very much want you to buy something from their agency because then they'll get the whole commission, both the buyers and sellers' commissions. But if they have to share it with somebody, they only get half the commission. This sort of thing, it's a natural pressure. There's a lot of problems, and a lot of people need money. The real estate industry took a terrible hit here. And I understand the predicament these people are in, and I sympathize to a point with them. But the idea is that your agent should only be working for you. And that's a wonderful thing about Maurice. He's another old guy like me. This is not the reason for existence. He's okay. He's going to be here. He'll be fine. He worked in the private sector as well as other activities with the Chamber of Commerce, American Chamber of Commerce, as executive director and all this sort of stuff. But he spent 37 years in the shipping business. He's got pensions, and he's going to be okay. So he is completely relaxed here. And he has very few properties that he himself shows. He and his wife and his daughter run a boutique shop, and it's just a relatively small number. His furthest thing from his mind, though, is selling one of those or any one of those. What happens is we get together, the two of us get together. I need to meet you to make that connection. I'm bringing people together. That's my job, so to speak. And then Maurice begins talking to them, and I watch the whole situation unfold. And they're off and running the next day, and we're very pleased with the results. I don't drag people out here for testimonials. I don't like it. It makes my skin crawl sometimes. But this is the fact. So it could be, what I may up to is that whether or not you use our service is not really an issue. If it was going to be an issue, I would be sending out emails every week, and I'd be doing a video and fancy stuff every week and all that, and to push. Oh, no, it's not that. It's to remind you that it's there, okay? But prices there's a reasonable possibility we see upward pressure. And I want you to know that once the people in these neighborhoods think that prices are now going back anything related to normal, in their minds, normal, watch the prices go up. They want part of that action. It pains them to have to rent something at $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 that they could easily get over $2,000, about maybe 24, 22, and they were maybe 20, maybe 25 at various times in the past. Well, not way back, but in the last few years. Very, very, well, they're going to be very happy when that happens, and everyone's going to be perky and happy. In the meantime, when I see what some of the agents here and agencies are pushing, I go, whoa, these are not discounted prices at all, and they are substantially higher. Saw one recently, very nice place for rent. We had rent, but not that different, very little difference between it and two others that we had found for people on Avenida Balboa, and this one was also in a high building and beautiful view of the bay and everything. But the point is that the total rent for the two that we were successful with was less than was being asked for the other one. Now, it had a third bedroom, but not a lot of people looking for that, you know. So I was amazed. Whoa. So I understand the need for money, but I don't understand sometimes how difficult it can be for somebody who's never lived in the country, never been here before, to come down and take a look at it. You need as much support as you can get, and we're here to give it to you if you want it. But you do, everything's about you, so we don't care. No, and we really don't. I will, meantime, go back and be perfectly cheerful doing everything that I do. So I say thank you very much for dropping by, for your patience with me, as forever. I do this all the time, you know that. But it's picking up, things are happening, and when they do, then I do. So it's a one-man shop here, except when I'm working with Maurice. It's a two-man shop. And we're happy. I certainly am very, very pleased. It's going to be its 20th year doing it. I must enjoy it for some reason, right? Thank you very much for stopping by. Look forward to seeing you again.